Everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about detaching records from your online family tree. Now last week we talked about attaching records and all the things that go into making sure that you're attaching the right records to the right people in your family tree. And this question came up in some of the comments and chat after the video aired. And people asked questions about, well, what if I've done it wrong? What if I found a record and I've attached it to my family tree and I need to remove that record? So today it's going to be really brief, but there are a couple of really important things I want to cover because removing a record isn't as simple as just clicking delete. There are a few things that you need to consider. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about what the things are that you need to consider before you remove a record. So there's only three things. One of them is you want to review the record details. Look over the record, make sure that you understand what information was on that record that you incorporated into your family tree and into your brain as an analysis about that record, so that as you go forward, you don't either keep picking up that same record, but also so that you know, number two, what relationships or facts were added to your tree automatically when you saved this record or merged this record into your tree. That's a really important step. So let's just come over here and let me just show you an example of what I mean. So we have this family here, and I have this 1930 census that I have saved. Now, if you remember from last week, every time you save a record, a census record from 1880 through 1940, it's not just attaching it to that person. Typically, it's going to attach it to the whole family. And so you need to understand the ramifications of that. Prior to 1880, we attach those records one person at a time in the family, and so you'll have to deal with them maybe a little bit more individually, but you'll figure that out as you go. So the first thing you want to do is you want to click on the record, and you may have noticed we have like these little orange or purple lines. I almost said orange, like I can't tell the difference. We have these little purple lines that will show you here are the facts in your family tree that are supported by this record that you added. Okay, so the first thing you want to be aware of is this record the only place where I got that fact? Now, if I have another record somewhere that tells me that he was born in 1894 in Poland, and that's why I thought this was him, I don't want to delete that birth fact, okay? But if the 1930 census is the only record I have collected so far that says he arrived in the United States in 1909, I'm going to want to delete that fact. So I can just open it up, edit, and click delete. And so then that will remove that particular fact. And then for every census in particular, now this works whether you have to think about whether you're working with a military record or an immigration record or a birth, marriage, or death record. Every record's going to have a little bit of different nuances. But the idea is what you're doing is you're looking in to see what facts are supported by the particular record that you attached. Now, I also mentioned you want to review the record itself. The easiest way that I have found to do this is the little trick that I showed you last week. Right-click on the link to view the record or the image and open that link in a new tab. And then that will open the record up here. And I would actually suggest maybe even going and viewing the original record here where it exists and review the record. Make sure that you understand what information came from this record and what information came from other records that you've already identified that really are this person. Now, this is really important because you want to make sure you're climbing your family tree and not somebody else's. And if you've attached an incorrect record, you may be chasing down somebody with the same name, living in the same time in the same place, but who all of a sudden has a different wife and different children, maybe immigrated in a different year, maybe was born in a different place. Right? So the idea is every piece of record that we add adds context to the identity of this individual. But if one of those records is incorrect, we've got a context that's incorrect, and we're going to be climbing up somebody else's family tree because we haven't identified the right person. So review the record in detail, just like you did when you attached it, to figure out which information you need to remove from the tree. And then once you have, and I open that in another tab often so that I can toggle back and forth between the tree and the record. And I'll do this a little bit as I remove these pieces of information. So then in this case, I'm going to want to remove that 1930 residence fact because that's not him. If the 1930 census is the only place where I have maybe this youngest child listed, maybe this youngest child, if this record isn't for him, this youngest child isn't his child. So then I'm going to want to delete that particular individual. And the way that I'm going to need to do that is to actually go to their profile and then click on Edit and Delete Person. And then I can delete that person from the tree. And so sometimes you have to delete facts in the timeline, and sometimes you have to delete entire people that have been added to the tree because of that record. So that's the simple way to review before you remove. Review the record details itself, the index page, the image, make sure you understand what information was added to your tree because of that record. Then you want to delete any relationships or people that were added to the tree because of that record alone. And then you want to delete any facts from the timeline that were added because of that record. And then once you have done that, then you can come in here and click on remove this particular record. And it will remove that record from your tree entirely, okay? Now, here's my final tip about this. And this is kind of an important thing because if you're anything like me, you do your family history when you have the time to do it, and sometimes it may be a while before you get back to a particular family in your tree. And I don't have the world's greatest memory, so I make notes, detailed notes about everything. So I would strongly encourage you, if you have removed a particular record, to go into the notes for this person and make a note about the record you just removed. Now that might seem a little bit counterintuitive to some of you. Those of you who've spent time with me on my videos know I make extensive notes about every record I find. Well, I also make notes about records that I've removed because I don't want to have to come across that record again and wonder, now, have I seen this record before, or why didn't I think this was them? So I just make a note that just says, 1930 census for Chicago, Illinois, was this person with this spouse and these children, and this was the information about them. And I determined that it was not him because, and then just write a few brief words about that particular analysis. That helps keep me on track. It helps keep me from remaking the same mistakes, and it helps me to quickly move through looking for new records that actually are about my person so that I can continue to climb my own family tree. Well, I promised you today would be brief. That is it. But I think that that's an important topic for a lot of you, particularly those of you who are new to family history or new to the online family tree system at Ancestry, to help you understand that you can't just delete a record, because when you add a record, it adds so much information to your tree. You have to make sure you remove the information from your tree, and then you can remove the record. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.